My name is Carmen, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing in my childhood home's living room watching my sister Melody scream at our parents like a woman possessed. The reason for her meltdown? She just discovered I have $42 million. After 32 years of being the invisible daughter, the one who got hand-me-downs while Melody got designer clothes, the one who worked 3 jobs for college while Melody's tuition was paid in full, I'm watching my family's true colors finally emerge. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who understands what it's like to be overlooked in your own family? Please hit that like button if you're ready for this wild ride, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when money reveals the truth about the people who are supposed to love you most. Let's get into how I went from the forgotten daughter to the one holding all the cards. Growing up in suburban Dallas, Texas, I learned early that in the Reynolds household, there were 2 types of children, Melody and me. My parents, Richard and Janet Reynolds, made it clear from the beginning that their firstborn daughter was their miracle, their golden child, their everything. When I came along 2 years later, it was like they'd used up all their love and attention on Melody and had nothing left for me. I still remember my 8th birthday with painful clarity. While Melody had gotten a brand new computer for her 10th birthday just months before, complete with all the latest software and games, I unwrapped a rusty secondhand bicycle that Dad had picked up from a garage sale. The chain fell off before I even made it down the driveway, and when I came back inside crying with scraped knees, Mom just sighed and told me I should be grateful for what I had. Melody sat at her computer desk, smirking as she played her new games, not even looking up when I ran past her room in tears. High school brought new levels of disparity. I took a job at the local grocery store, working 20 hours a week bagging groceries and mopping floors just to have money for basic necessities. Meanwhile, Melody received a monthly allowance of $300 for doing absolutely nothing. She'd parade around school in designer jeans and the latest sneakers while I wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, all bought from discount stores with my hard-earned cash. When kids at school made fun of my clothes, Melody would join in, pretending she didn't even know me in the hallways. The academic achievements that should have made my parents proud only seemed to annoy them. I brought home straight A's every semester, took advanced placement classes, and scored in the 98th percentile on my SATs. The refrigerator remained bare of my report cards, while Melody's mediocre B's and C's were celebrated with dinner at fancy restaurants and shopping sprees. When I was named valedictorian of my class, my parents didn't even attend the ceremony. They were busy that night taking Melody to look at cars for her high school graduation gift, even though she'd barely scraped by with a 2.5 GPA. College applications became another battlefield of favoritism. When I presented my acceptance letter to University of Texas at Austin for computer science, along with a partial scholarship, I begged my parents to co-sign a loan for the remaining costs. My father looked at me like I'd asked him to sell a kidney. "College isn't for everyone, Carmen," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe you should consider community college or just keep working." 2 weeks later, they announced at dinner that Melody had been accepted to a private liberal arts college in California. The tuition was $60,000 a year, and they'd already written the check for her first semester. That night changed everything for me. I moved out on my 18th birthday, cramming my few possessions into garbage bags and taking the bus to a studio apartment on the wrong side of Austin. The place was infested with cockroaches and had a leak in the ceiling, but it was mine. I worked 3 jobs to survive, waitressing at a diner from 5 a.m. to noon, tutoring high school kids in math from 2 to 6 p.m., and cleaning office buildings from 8 p.m. to midnight. My days blurred together in an exhausting cycle of work, study, and precious few hours of sleep. While I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and generic ramen noodles, Melody's Instagram feed filled with photos from her European summer vacation. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, all funded by our parents who claimed they couldn't spare $50 when I'd called asking for help buying textbooks. She posed in front of the Eiffel Tower in a designer dress that cost more than my monthly rent, captioning it "Living my best life thanks to the best parents ever." The comments section filled with hearts and fire emojis while I sat in my roach-infested apartment, eating cold noodles and studying by the light of a single lamp I'd found by a dumpster. My parents visited Melody at her California college once a month, flying out for parents' weekends and sorority events. In the 4 years I spent at UT Austin, they visited me exactly 0 times. When I called to invite them to a computer science showcase where I was presenting my senior project, Mom said they were busy that weekend. I later saw photos on Facebook of them at Melody's roommate's birthday party that same day, toasting champagne and laughing in a Beverly Hills restaurant. Despite everything, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science and a minor in business. As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I scanned the crowd hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents had surprised me. Instead, I saw empty seats where family should have been. My only support came from my manager at the diner, Rosa, who had become more of a mother to me than Janet Reynolds ever was. She cheered louder than anyone when they called my name, and I had to fight back tears thinking about how a woman I'd known for 4 years cared more about my achievements than the people who gave me life. The final insult of my childhood came when I returned to pack up the last of my things from my childhood room. I discovered that my parents had already given the space to Melody for storage while I was still technically living there. My few remaining possessions had been thrown into boxes and shoved into the garage. Melody's old pageant trophies and high school yearbooks now occupied the shelves where my academic awards had once sat. It was like they'd erased me from the house entirely, replacing any trace of my existence with more shrines to their preferred daughter. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a small tech startup in Austin called Dataflow Solutions. The salary was modest, barely enough to upgrade from my roach-infested studio to a slightly better one-bedroom apartment, but I was grateful for the opportunity. While my college classmates were taking positions at Google and Microsoft, I knew I needed to prove myself first. What they didn't know was that I had bigger plans than any corporate ladder could offer. I threw myself into my work with the same intensity I'd applied to my studies. 80-hour weeks became my norm, arriving at the office before sunrise and leaving long after the cleaning crew had gone home. While my coworkers complained about work-life balance, I taught myself advanced programming languages at night, watched coding tutorials during my lunch breaks, and spent weekends experimenting with new technologies. My apartment became a second office, with whiteboards covering every wall filled with algorithms and flowcharts. It was during one of those late-night coding sessions that I stumbled upon something revolutionary. I'd been working on a data compression algorithm for fun, trying to solve a problem that had been bothering me about inefficient storage systems. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, running on nothing but coffee and determination, I cracked it. My algorithm could compress data files to less than 10% of their original size without any loss of quality. I tested it repeatedly, sure I must be making an error, but the results were consistent. I'd created something that could change how companies stored and transmitted data. 6 months later, Dataflow was acquired by a larger tech company. As one of the early employees, I received an equity payout of $50,000. My coworkers celebrated with expensive dinners and new cars, but I had different plans. Every penny went into developing my compression algorithm into a marketable product. I lived like I was still making minimum wage, eating rice and beans, taking the bus instead of buying a car, and wearing the same professional clothes I'd bought secondhand after graduation. During this time, Melody was living her best life in California. She'd met Brett Morrison at a charity gala, the heir to a real estate fortune, and their whirlwind romance was all over social media. When they announced their engagement after just 6 months of dating, my parents acted like royalty was joining the family. The wedding planning consumed their lives, with Mom calling me only once during that entire year, and that was to inform me of the date and tell me not to embarrass the family by showing up in my usual ragged clothes. The wedding was a 300-guest affair at a vineyard in Napa Valley. I'd saved for months to afford an appropriate dress and a wedding gift, taking extra freelance coding jobs on top of my regular work. When I arrived at the venue, I discovered my name card placed me at table 19, in the back corner with distant relatives and my parents' accountant's kids. The head table, where Melody sat in her $40,000 dress, seemed miles away. During the father-daughter dance, Dad gave a speech about his one and only precious daughter and how proud he was to have raised such a remarkable young woman. Several guests glanced at me with confusion, clearly aware that Richard Reynolds had 2 daughters. The humiliation peaked when Mom cornered me during the reception. "Carmen, family helps family," she said, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "Melody and Brett have so many expenses starting their new life. We think you should give them at least $5,000 as a wedding gift. After all, you have that fancy tech job now." I stared at her in disbelief. $5,000 was more than I had in my bank account after paying for my trip to the wedding. When I handed over a card with a $100 check inside, she actually scared at me and muttered something about selfishness before walking away. 3 months after the wedding, I faced my first major business setback. Marcus Chin, a developer I'd partnered with to help build the user interface for my compression software, disappeared with copies of my code. I discovered he was shopping it around to venture capitalists, claiming it as his own invention. The betrayal stung worse than anything my family had done because I'd trusted Marcus with my dream. We'd worked side by side for months, and I'd thought he believed in the vision as much as I did. The legal battle that followed nearly destroyed me. I spent every penny of my savings on lawyers, maxed out credit cards I'd sworn never to use, and sold everything valuable I owned, which wasn't much. For a year, I lived on nothing but spite and instant noodles while fighting to prove the code was mine. The stress triggered severe insomnia and anxiety attacks that left me shaking on my apartment floor at 3 a.m., wondering if it was all worth it. I had no one to call, no family to lean on, no safety net if I failed. Finally, after 14 months of depositions, code reviews, and court appearances, the judge ruled in my favor. Marcus had to pay damages and surrender all claims to the software, but the victory felt hollow. I'd lost a year of progress, depleted my finances, and learned that in the tech world, like in my family, people would try to take credit for your work if given the chance. But something had hardened inside me during that fight. I wasn't the scared girl begging for scraps of attention anymore. I was a fighter who'd won her first real battle. I went back to my empty apartment that night, sat on my mattress on the floor since I'd sold my bed frame, and made a decision. I wouldn't just rebuild. I would build something so big, so undeniable, that no one could ever dismiss me again. The compression software was good, but it was just the beginning. My real revenge wouldn't come from anger or confrontation. It would come from success so complete that my worth could never again be questioned. With the legal battle behind me, I pivoted my focus entirely. The compression algorithm, while revolutionary, had attracted too much attention from the wrong people. I needed something new, something that couldn't be easily stolen or replicated. Cybersecurity was exploding as a field, with companies desperate for better protection against increasingly sophisticated threats. I saw an opportunity and dove in headfirst. For 6 months, I lived like a ghost. My apartment became purely functional, just a place to sleep between coding sessions at the public library. I couldn't afford proper internet anymore, so I spent 12 hours a day at the library, using their free Wi-Fi and outdated computers to build my new software. The librarians started bringing me coffee, worried about the girl who arrived when they opened and left when they closed. I survived on dollar menu items and the free samples at the grocery store, putting every saved penny into server costs and development tools. My new project was elegant in its simplicity, a cybersecurity program that could predict and prevent attacks before they happened by analyzing patterns in seemingly unrelated data points. While existing software played defense, mine played offense. I named it Preempt, and by the time I had a working prototype, tech blogs were buzzing about rumors of its capabilities. A major Silicon Valley firm, Nexus Technologies, reached out through LinkedIn asking for a meeting. I had exactly one professional outfit, a black pantsuit I'd bought at a thrift store and had tailored with YouTube tutorials. The flight to California was my first time on a plane since childhood, paid for by Nexus. I spent the entire flight reviewing my presentation, terrified they'd see through my confident facade to the exhausted, broke woman beneath. But when I walked into that conference room and demonstrated Preempt's capabilities, the energy shifted. These executives, who probably had wines in their cellars worth more than my net worth, were leaning forward, asking rapid-fire questions, clearly excited. Their initial offer was $2 million for exclusive rights to Preempt. I had practiced this moment in my bathroom mirror 100 times. "I appreciate the offer," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "but Preempt is worth considerably more than that. I'm thinking $5 million plus a 3% royalty on all licenses sold." The room went quiet. The lead negotiator smiled. 3 hours later, I walked out with a deal for $5 million upfront, for percent royalties, and a consulting contract worth another $1 million over 2 years. The same week I signed the papers, Melody's perfect life imploded. Brett had been caught embezzling from his family's company, and their assets were frozen. Melody, who'd never worked a day in her life, suddenly found herself divorced and penniless. She moved back into our parents' house, claiming severe mental trauma and anxiety. My parents, predictably, welcomed her with open arms and immediately began funding her recovery, which seemed to involve a lot of online shopping and spa days. That's when the call started. First Dad, his voice unusually warm. "Carmen, sweetheart, we heard you're doing well at that computer job. Your mother and I were wondering if you could help your sister out with a small loan, maybe $20,000? Just until she gets back on her feet." I stared at my phone in disbelief. They'd never called me sweetheart in my entire life. I told them I didn't have that kind of money available, which was technically true since the $5 million was still in escrow. The warmth evaporated immediately. "I should have known," he spat. "You've always been selfish. Your sister is suffering, and you can't even help your own family." Mom's call came next, and it was worse. She cried, actually cried, about how I was breaking her heart by abandoning them in their time of need. "We gave you life," she sobbed. "We raised you, and this is how you repay us? By watching your sister suffer." When I stayed firm, she switched tactics. "You know what? You're not really family anyway. You never were. At least Melody loves us enough to stay close. You're just a heartless stranger who shares our last name." The betrayal that hurt most came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Linda, my father's sister who'd always been kind to me at family gatherings, called out of the blue. "Carmen, honey, I'm worried about you," she said. "Your parents told everyone at Thanksgiving that you're struggling with addiction. They said that's why you never come around anymore, that you're too ashamed. Is everything okay? Do you need help?" The room spun. My own parents were telling people I was a drug addict to explain my absence, rather than admit they'd driven me away. I hung up and didn't speak to any of them for 6 months. Instead, I buried myself in building my company, Cyber Shield Incorporated. With the Nexus deal finalized, I had capital to hire a small team of brilliant developers who believed in my vision. We worked out of a converted warehouse, pizza boxes, and energy drinks fueling late-night coding sessions. But this time, I wasn't alone. I handpicked people who were hungry like I'd been, overlooked by bigger companies, but burning with potential. Within a year, we'd developed 3 more security products. Tech giants were circling, sensing opportunity. Oracle made an offer. Then Microsoft. But it was Atlas Digital that won, offering $15 million for the company plus stock options that could be worth another $20 million if their IPO went as planned. My lawyers advised me to take it, but I had one condition: my team all got retention bonuses and guaranteed positions. I wouldn't abandon the people who'd helped me build this dream. The deal was structured through a series of offshore companies and investment vehicles, partly for tax efficiency, but mostly for privacy. I'd learned that in my family, money made you a target. The financial press reported the acquisition, but didn't name individual shareholders. To anyone looking, CyberShield Inc. was just another startup absorbed by a tech giant. But I knew the truth. At 29 years old, I was worth over $20 million, with more coming from royalties and stock options. The forgotten daughter had built an empire in the shadows. With my newfound wealth secured and privately held, I made a conscious choice to maintain my modest lifestyle. I upgraded from my one-bedroom apartment to a comfortable two-bedroom in a middle-class neighborhood, but nothing that would draw attention. My biggest splurge was trading in my bus pass for a reliable 10-year-old Honda Civic. To anyone looking, I was just another Austin tech worker living within her means. The real changes happened behind the scenes. I established the Rising Phoenix Foundation, focusing on scholarships for working students who, like me, were fighting to succeed without family support. I started angel investing, specifically seeking out female entrepreneurs who'd been overlooked by traditional venture capital. My first investment was in Rosa's daughter, Maria, who had an idea for a food delivery app targeting elderly communities. When her app sold to DoorDash 2 years later, my $100,000 investment returned $3 million. Success bred success. I had an eye for founders who'd been underestimated, probably because I saw myself in them. A Black woman creating AI-powered diagnostic tools that doctors ignored until I funded her pilot program. An immigrant mother designing affordable water purification systems while raising 3 kids alone. A transgender programmer building accessibility software for disabled users. Each investment wasn't just about money. It was about proving that brilliance existed outside the traditional tech bro stereotype. My portfolio grew quietly but dramatically. Several early investments hit massive returns, pushing my net worth past $30 million, then $35, then $40. I structured everything through LLCs and holding companies, keeping my name off public documents. The only signs of my wealth were the anonymous donations showing up at food banks, women's shelters, and scholarship funds across Texas. I even sent regular anonymous contributions to my old high school, specifically earmarked for students working part-time jobs. Meanwhile, Melody's situation continued to deteriorate. Her Instagram, once filled with luxury travel and designer goods, now showcased a series of failed business ventures funded entirely by our parents. First came the fashion boutique, Melody's Closet, which closed after 6 months when she refused to show up for work. Then the jewelry line that never produced a single piece because she spent the startup capital on personal shopping sprees. The lifestyle blog Living Melodiously lasted 3 posts before she got bored. Each failure drained more from our parents' savings. They refinanced their house twice, cashed out Dad's 401k, and even sold Mom's jewelry to fund Melody's dreams. I watched from afar through social media and occasional reports from cousins, seeing my parents age rapidly under the financial strain. Yet they never reached out to me except when asking for money, and they continued spreading lies about my supposed failures and addictions. Everything changed the day I ran into Rachel Morrison, my high school calculus partner, at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. We chatted about life after graduation, and she mentioned volunteering at the local food bank. "It's so sad," she said, stirring her latte. "I actually saw your parents there last week. They looked really rough. I didn't know they were struggling so much." My heart stopped. My parents, who'd spent hundreds of thousands on Melody's whims, were now visiting food banks. That night, I made a decision that would later prove crucial. I had my lawyer send an anonymous cashier's check for $50,000 to my parents' address with a typed note, "For groceries and necessities only." I genuinely wanted to help, despite everything. Maybe it was weakness, or maybe it was my way of proving I was better than they'd ever been to me. Either way, I expected nothing but hoped they'd use it wisely. 2 weeks later, Melody posted photos from a spa resort in Sedona, #treatingmyself, #mentalhealthmatters. My cousin Terry, who worked at their bank, quietly told me the $50,000 check had been deposited and withdrawn within 3 days. But on Facebook, my mother posted about their struggles, how they were abandoned by family and making ends meet alone. The comments filled with sympathy and offers of help, several mentioning how sad it was that their drug-addicted daughter Carmen couldn't help them. Melody even started a blog post series called Being the Only Child Who Cares, documenting her journey of supporting elderly parents alone. She painted herself as a saint, sacrificing her own dreams to care for parents her sister had abandoned. The posts went mini-viral in our hometown, shared by well-meaning friends who had no idea about the truth. She never mentioned the mysterious $50,000 that funded her spa retreat. My net worth crossed $40 million after a biotech investment paid off spectacularly. The company developed a revolutionary diabetes treatment, and my early stake returned 50 times my initial investment. Then came the acquisition offer I couldn't refuse. My royalties from preempt and ongoing consulting contracts were bought out for a lump sum of $8 million. At 32, my carefully hidden empire was worth $42 million. That's when I saw the listing. My childhood home, the house where I'd been invisible for 18 years, was in foreclosure. The bank would auction it next month unless the outstanding debt of $300,000 was paid. Despite everything, seeing that listing hurt. Not because of nostalgia for happy memories, since I had so few, but because it represented the final collapse of the facade my parents had maintained. They'd lost everything propping up their golden child. I instructed my lawyer to set up one more LLC, Phoenix Properties, and prepare a cash offer for the house. Not out of sentimentality, but because I realized it was time. Time to stop hiding. Time to stop protecting people who'd never protected me. Time to show them exactly what their forgotten daughter had become. I didn't plan to reveal everything at first, just buy the house quietly and decide what to do later. But fate, as always with my family, had other plans. The closing was set for a Friday afternoon. I dressed carefully in an expensive but understated suit, my hair professionally styled, my grandmother's ring that I'd saved from a pawn shop on my finger. I looked successful but not ostentatiously wealthy. The plan was simple: sign papers, take possession, and leave without drama. I should have known better. When it came to my family, there was always drama. I arrived at the title company office 15 minutes early, needing time to compose myself before facing my childhood home's transformation into a business transaction. My lawyer James Chin was already there, a sharp Korean-American attorney who specialized in high-net-worth privacy protection. He'd handled all my deals with perfect discretion, but today I'd asked him to be present in person. Something told me I'd need a witness. The conference room door opened, and my parents walked in with Melody trailing behind. They looked older, grayer, defeated. Dad's expensive suits had been replaced by ill-fitting clothes from discount stores. Mom's perfectly manicured appearance had given way to drugstore makeup and home-colored hair. But Melody still somehow managed designer jeans and fresh highlights, priorities clearly unchanged despite their circumstances. They froze when they saw me. For a moment, nobody moved. The real estate agent, a chirpy blonde named Stephanie, sensed the tension immediately. "Oh, do you all know each other?" she asked brightly. I stayed silent, letting the moment stretch. It was my mother who broke first, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then calculation in the span of seconds. "Carmen," she whispered, as if saying my name might make me disappear like I had from their lives. "What are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Stephanie made the fatal error that would detonate my carefully controlled revelation. "Ms. Reynolds is our buyer," she announced, shuffling through her papers. "She's purchasing the property through her company, Phoenix Properties LLC." The temperature in the room plummeted. Melody's head snapped between me and the papers, her mind visibly racing. Dad sank into a chair like someone had cut his strings. But Melody, golden child Melody, started connecting dots with the kind of focus she'd never applied to anything productive in her life. She pulled out her phone, frantically typing, and I knew she was searching for information about Phoenix Properties, about me, about the truth they'd all been too dismissive to see. "Holy shit," she breathed, finding something on her screen. Her face flushed red, then purple, then white. "There's a Forbes article. The Hidden Millionaires of Tech. It mentions C. Reynolds. Carmen Reynolds. It says. She couldn't finish, just thrust her phone at our parents with shaking hands. I watched my father read, his expression morphing from confusion to disbelief to something that looked almost like fear. The explosion came exactly as I'd imagined it would, except louder. Melody launched herself across the table, screaming incoherently about betrayal and lies. $42 million. You have 42 million fucking dollars while we were at food banks. While I had to give up everything. While mom and dad lost their house. Security had to physically restrain her as she tried to claw at my face, her perfectly maintained nails seeking blood. My parents' transformation was more subtle, but equally dramatic. Suddenly, I wasn't the family disappointment anymore. Mom's eyes filled with tears, reaching for my hand across the table. Oh, Carmen, our baby girl. We've missed you so much. We always loved you equally, you know that, right? We were just trying to practice tough love to make you strong and independent. And look, it worked. You're so successful. Dad cleared his throat, attempting to salvage his patriarchal authority. We always knew you had potential, Carmen. That's why we pushed you harder. Melody needed more support because she was fragile, but you? You were our fighter. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. The lies rolled off their tongues so smoothly I almost admired the performance. Almost. Tough love. I asked quietly, and something in my tone made everyone freeze. Is that what you called it when you gave Melody a car for graduation while I took the bus? When you paid $60,000 a year for her college, but wouldn't co-sign a loan for mine? When you told the entire family I was a drug addict rather than admit I'd cut contact because of your favoritism? The mask slipped for just a moment before Mom doubled down. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Melody had special needs, emotional needs. You were always so capable, so independent. We knew you'd be fine on your own. The irony of her calling Melody special needs while I'd worked myself into anxiety attacks alone in my apartment wasn't lost on anyone in the room. But it was Melody's next revelation that truly showed how deep the deception ran. This is bullshit. She screamed, having given up on physical attacks. I know you've been successful for years. I hired a private investigator after I saw your LinkedIn update about that first company. I told Mom and Dad, but they said pathetic little Carmen could never actually succeed. They said the company probably failed, that you were lying to seem important. The words hung in the air like poison gas. My parents had known. They'd known I was succeeding and chose to continue their narrative of my failure. Every family gathering where they'd painted me as a lost cause, every sympathy-seeking Facebook post about their wayward daughter, every excuse for my absence had been a deliberate lie. They'd rather tell people I was an addict than admit their least favorite child had surpassed their wildest dreams. I demand half, Melody announced, as if her entitlement was a royal decree. Half of everything you have. For emotional damages. For the trauma of watching you succeed while I suffered. For keeping secrets from your family. I'll see you for financial abuse. Psychological manipulation. Fraud. She was making up legal terms now, grasping at any straw that might turn into gold. James, who'd been quietly observing this family melodrama, finally spoke. Ms. Reynolds has actually been quite generous with your family, though you may not have known it. He pulled out a folder, laying out documentation. Anonymous payments totaling over $200,000 over the past 3 years. Checks that coincidentally appeared when your family faced foreclosure, medical bills, and other hardships. All traced back to accounts connected to my client. The silence was deafening. I watched realization dawn on their faces, followed quickly by greed. They'd spent years taking my anonymous help while publicly painting me as a failure, and now they wanted more. Melody recovered first, switching tactics. Then she admits she has the money. She's been watching us struggle, manipulation the situation, playing God with our lives. That's even worse. She pulled out her phone, starting a Facebook live stream before anyone could stop her. I want everyone to see this, she announced to her followers. My sister Carmen, who abandoned our family, has been hiding $42 million while our elderly parents suffered. She bought their house out from under them. She's a narcissist who gets off on watching family pain. The comments started flowing immediately, hearts and angry faces piling up as Melody painted her distorted picture. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing nonstop. Somehow, Melody's followers had found my number. The messages ranged from disappointed to threatening, all based on the twisted narrative she was spinning in real time. 3 major investment deals I had pending started texting, asking about the family situation and whether we should postpone meetings. My carefully maintained privacy was crumbling in real time, destroyed by the very people who'd made anonymity necessary. The situation spiraled faster than even I had anticipated. Melody's Facebook Live video went viral within hours, shared by thousands who loved a good family drama story. Millionaire sister watches parents starve became a trending topic on Twitter. My phone became unusable from the constant notifications, and my business email filled with messages from reporters wanting my side of the story. 3 decades of being invisible, and suddenly I was infamous. By evening, Melody had escalated her campaign. She created a GoFundMe titled, "Help Us Rebuild After Sisterly Betrayal," claiming I had emotionally manipulated the family for years and stolen opportunities from her. The fiction she wrote was creative. I'd give her that. According to her version, I'd sabotaged her businesses, spread lies about her to investors, and used my tech connections to destroy her marriage. The goal was set at $10 million, and sympathetic strangers had already donated thousands. My legal team worked through the night, but the damage was spreading. Several potential investors in my latest venture, a healthcare technology startup, called to express concerns about the optics. One actually said, "We can't be associated with someone who treats family this way." The irony of losing deals because I'd refused to enable my toxic family wasn't lost on me, but it still stung. Everything I'd built through merit was being threatened by the narrative skills of someone who'd never worked an honest day in her life. Then came the betrayal that cut deepest. Dana Morrison, my best friend from elementary school before my family made friendship impossible, sold her story to a tabloid blog. Carmen Reynolds, the cold truth behind the millionaire, featured cherry-picked memories twisted to support Melody's narrative. Dana told them about the time I didn't share my lunch in 3rd grade, forgetting to mention it was because I didn't have lunch to share. She painted me as calculating and cold even as a child, someone who always kept score and never forgot a slight. My parents, emboldened by the public support, went on local morning television. They sat on a couch looking fragile and wounded, telling the host about their lost daughter who had abandoned them in their time of need. Mom actually produced tears on cue when describing how she used to wait by the phone hoping I'd call. She conveniently omitted the part where she'd told me I wasn't really family anymore. Dad spoke about the sacrifices they'd made raising 2 daughters, how they'd gone without so we could have opportunities, painting a picture of devoted parents betrayed by an ungrateful child. The narrative was taking hold, but my team discovered something that would change everything. While investigating Melody's claims for a potential defamation suit, they found a pattern of identity theft going back years. Melody had been using my social security number to open credit cards, take out loans, and even file false tax returns. The amounts were staggering, over $300,000 in fraudulent debt that had been destroying my credit while I rebuilt it repeatedly, never understanding why it kept dropping. More damning still was the paper trail showing our parents' involvement. They'd co-sign loans using my information, helped Melody hide the fraud by intercepting mail at their house, and even used some of the stolen funds for their own expenses. Bank security footage showed all 3 of them together conducting transactions with my stolen identity. The anonymous $50,000 I'd sent them? They'd laughed about stupid Carmen still trying to buy their love while depositing it. James presented me with 2 options. We could pursue criminal charges that would likely result in prison time for all 3 of them, or we could use this as leverage for a clean break. Despite everything, the thought of seeing my parents in handcuffs made me physically ill. These people had given me life, even if they'd made that life miserable. But they'd also committed federal crimes, and their public campaign was destroying everything I'd built. I called a family meeting at James's office, this time with security present and no media allowed. Melody showed up dressed like she was attending a red carpet event, clearly expecting to negotiate her millions. My parents wore matching Team Family t-shirts with childhood photos of all of us, a prop for any cameras they might encounter. The performative nature of their affection would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. "Here's what's going to happen," I began, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. "I have evidence of systematic identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy spanning over a decade. Federal crimes that carry serious prison time. But I'm willing to let that go under specific conditions." I slid the folder across the table, watching their faces change as they recognized their own signatures on fraudulent documents. Melody erupted predictably. "This is blackmail. You're threatening us. I'll tell everyone you're trying to silence me with intimidation." She was already reaching for her phone when security stepped forward. The reality of her situation finally seemed to penetrate her delusion. For the first time in her life, Melody couldn't manipulate her way out of consequences. My terms were simple. I would pay off the house mortgage and give them $200,000 in cash. In exchange, they would sign comprehensive NDAs, cease all public commentary about me, and never contact me again. Any violation would result in immediate criminal prosecution. It was more than they deserved, but less than they wanted, which made it perfect. The alternative was federal charges, asset forfeiture, and very public trials that would destroy whatever reputation they had left. Dad tried one last manipulation. "Carmen, sweetheart, we're family. Can't we work this out without lawyers? Your mother's heart can't take this stress. Don't you care about her health?" The same man who'd ignored my stress-induced anxiety attacks was now playing the health card. The audacity was almost impressive. Mom clutched her chest dramatically, but the effect was ruined when she forgot which side her heart was on. Melody made one final demand. $10 million. "I want $10 million or I'll keep talking. I don't care about prison. You've already destroyed my life anyway. What's the difference between being poor and being in jail?" The entitlement was breathtaking. She genuinely believed she deserved millions simply for being born first, for being loved more, for failing at everything while I succeeded despite them. "The offer stands as presented," I said, gathering my papers. "You have 24 hours to decide. Accept it or face the consequences of your choices. Either way, this is the last time we'll be in the same room." I stood to leave, then turned back one final time. "Oh, and Melody? The difference between being poor and being in jail is that poor people can still post on Instagram. Think about that." The next morning, their lawyer called. They'd accept the deal. The paperwork was signed within a week. $200,000 transferred to an account I'd never touch again, the mortgage paid off on a house I'd never visit, and 3 signatures on documents that finally, legally, ended my obligation to the people who'd never felt obligated to me. As I walked out of that final meeting, I felt something I hadn't expected: grief. Not for losing them, but for the family I'd never had, the relationships that existed only in my imagination. The public backlash from Melody's campaign took months to fully resolve. My crisis management team worked overtime, but I'd learned that lies spread faster than truth in the digital age. We took a different approach than fighting fire with fire. Instead of defending myself, I let my work speak. The Rising Phoenix Foundation announced a new initiative: full scholarships for 100 students who'd been financially abandoned by their families. The stories that emerged from applicants were heartbreakingly familiar. I wasn't alone in being the scapegoat child who'd found success despite family sabotage. An investigative journalist named Sarah Walsh reached out, not for a hit piece, but because she'd noticed discrepancies in Melody's narrative. Her research uncovered the pattern of failed businesses, the mysterious windfalls that coincided with my anonymous gifts, and most importantly, the criminal investigation that had been quietly opened into the identity theft. When her article, "The Truth Behind the Viral Family Feud," published 3 months later, it included documentation that completely dismantled Melody's fiction. The GoFundMe was shut down, and she faced her own legal challenges from defrauding donors. My parents, bound by the NDA and facing potential criminal charges, maintained their silence. But actions spoke louder. They sold the house I'd saved from foreclosure within 6 months, moving to a small apartment in Florida. The $200,000 disappeared quickly, and by the year's end, they were back to their financial struggles. Some relatives reached out, having finally understood the truth, but I wasn't interested in building relationships based on my bank account balance. The family that had rejected Carmen the grocery bagger didn't get to claim Carmen the millionaire. Through all of this, I found healing in unexpected places. My therapist, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, specialized in family trauma and helped me understand that my drive for success had been both a blessing and a coping mechanism. "You built an empire to prove you had worth," she said during one session, "but your worth was never determined by their inability to see it." Learning to separate my identity from my achievements became the hardest challenge I'd faced, harder than building companies or facing down corporate sharks. I also found my chosen family. Sarah Walsh, the journalist who'd told my truth, became a close friend. We bonded over similar experiences with narcissistic family members and the guilt that comes with cutting toxic people out of your life. My team at the foundation, the entrepreneurs I'd invested in, the scholarship recipients who sent letters about their achievements, these people became my tribe. They knew me as Carmen, not as a bank account or a success story, but as a person who understood their struggles because I'd lived them. Love came unexpectedly in the form of Dr. Mitchell Torres, a surgeon who volunteered at medical camps my foundation sponsored. He'd grown up in foster care, understanding intimately what it meant to create your own family. Our first date lasted 8 hours, talking about everything from childhood trauma to our dreams for the future. He never once asked about my net worth, more interested in my thoughts on ethical AI and healthcare. When I finally told him about the $42 million, he just nodded and asked if I'd considered funding research into mental health accessibility for low-income families. A year after the confrontation, I stood before an auditorium of scholarship recipients at the annual Rising Phoenix Gala. Looking at their faces, I saw my younger self in every one of them. The girl working 3 jobs to afford textbooks. The boy whose parents threw him out for choosing engineering over the family business. The young woman whose family called her selfish for pursuing education instead of supporting her siblings. Each had been told they were worth less than someone else in their family, and each had refused to believe it. "Blood doesn't make family," I told them, sharing my story publicly for the first time. "Love does. Support does. Showing up does. Some of us have to build our families from scratch, choosing people who see our worth when biology fails us. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that diminish you, no matter what DNA you share. Your success is not revenge. It's proof that you are always worthy of investment, even when that investment had to come from yourself." The standing ovation that followed wasn't for my success or my money. It was recognition from people who understood the journey, who knew what it cost to rise without a foundation of family support. Several were crying, and I realized I was too. Not from sadness, but from the relief of finally being seen by people who mattered, who valued me for more than what I could provide financially. 3 years after that final confrontation, I received word through lawyers that Melody had been arrested for fraud related to a new scheme targeting elderly investors. My parents, now in their 70s, had lost their apartment and were living in subsidized housing. Part of me felt the pull of old patterns, the urge to save them despite everything. But I'd learned the difference between compassion and enabling. I made anonymous donations to the senior center where they received services, ensuring they had access to food and healthcare. But I didn't break the no-contact order. Boundaries, I'd learned, were not cruel. They were necessary for survival. Today, at 35, my net worth has grown to over $60 million through careful investments and the continued success of my companies. But my real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's in the 1,000 students who've graduated debt-free through our scholarships. It's in the companies founded by women who were told they weren't technical enough, smart enough, connected enough. It's in the Sunday dinners with my chosen family, the quiet mornings with Mitchell, the peace that comes from living authentically without seeking approval from those incapable of giving it. My story isn't unique. Millions of us survive families that see us as supporting characters in someone else's narrative. We build ourselves from scratch, achieve success that seems impossible given our starting point, and grapple with guilt over boundaries that save our lives. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my journey, know this: you don't owe your success to people who didn't invest in your potential. Your achievements belong to you, earned through your sacrifice, your sleepless nights, your refusal to accept the role they assigned you. Blood may be thicker than water, but I've learned that the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family you choose, the one that celebrates your victories and supports your struggles without condition or manipulation, is your real family. And sometimes, the greatest success isn't what you build, but who you become once you stop trying to earn love that was never available to purchase. Money didn't corrupt my family, it revealed them. It showed that their love had always been transactional, just waiting for a high enough bid. But it also revealed me, not as the forgotten daughter or the family disappointment, but as someone who could transform pain into purpose, rejection into resilience. That's worth more than $42 million. That's priceless. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I'm curious, have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who only showed interest when you became successful? What's your story of choosing yourself over toxic relationships? Please share in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these important stories reach people who need to hear them. And if you know someone dealing with family favoritism or considering cutting toxic ties, please share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing. Until next time, remember, your worth was never up for debate, and the right people will see your value without a price tag attached.